Now, there's mounting concern about a sharp rise in attacks on Western troops by their Afghan counterparts in Afghanistan. In the most recent attack, 2 US troops were gunned down by a member of the Afghan National Army just this week.
So far, 12 soldiers have been killed this month in the so-called green on blue attacks. Major General Jim Molan is a retired Army general who served in Afghanistan, and he joins us now from Canberra. Why are these attacks taking place?
Karina and Michael, good morning. It's a very complex situation at the moment, I think, Karina. We're facing the withdrawal of Western troops, which for we in the West is a fairly final move. But for the Afghans now, this is a precursor to what I suspect is going to be their biggest challenge. The biggest challenge to the Afghan state, the new Afghan state, is going to be after 2015. After we leave at the end of 2014, 2015 onwards is going to be a really big challenge. So the tensions in that country at the moment are quite extraordinary. They're being manifest in a number of different ways with attacks here and there, and the attacks on ISAF troops, on the Western troops in Afghanistan, is probably the most visible aspect of that increased tension. And there's a whole number of different reasons why that's occurring, Karina.
Do you think these attacks will become more prevalent as foreign troops begin to withdraw ahead of that 2014 exit date?
There is a possibility that will occur. They've increased significantly from 2010, when there were 20 such killings. In 2011 there were 35, and this year so far there's been 40. So the probability of them increasing is high. But of course, Western troops are going to leave, and at the moment Western troops are spread out, particularly US troops are spread out in very small groups amongst the Afghans. And given the fact that there is a probability that many of the Afghans may have doubt as to whether they can stand alone against the Taliban attack which may come, a Taliban offensive which may come after 2014, there's an increased probability that Taliban can influence individual Afghan troops that are being trained by our troops.
How much has trust been eroded between NATO troops and the Afghan army themselves?
Well, I think we've got to keep it in perspective. Yes, we've had a record number of troops, of Western troops, being killed by their Afghan trainees or their Afghan comrades this year, and that's a real tragedy, but it's not an unusual occurrence. So this is not going to bring down the whole edifice that we're trying to build there. But on an individual basis, you cannot help but think of it. This happened in Vietnam, it happened in Iraq, but there is no other way to do it. What we expect from our soldiers, both our Australian soldiers and the Western soldiers throughout the rest of Afghanistan, is that they put their life on the line in all of these situations. And that's something that we should realise. You know, I think that what we've done in Afghanistan was the right thing to do. I'm just not too sure whether we're doing it the right way.
A lot of these attacks have been said that they've stemmed from an infiltration of the Taliban insurgents into the Afghan forces. Does there need to be greater engagement with more moderate elements of the Taliban?
Well, I think we've definitely got to speak to the Taliban as often as possible. But my fear at the moment is that in negotiating with the Taliban now, we have lost the ability to negotiate from a position of strength. If we've said we're leaving, if we've said we're going to, in some bizarre strategy, we're going to reduce the Afghan armed forces because we say we can't afford to pay for them, from 352,000 back to about 250,000, then we're not negotiating from a position of strength. Therefore, the Taliban can play us. But I don't think that's really the carry-on back into the some Afghans conducting attacks on Western troops. There are 10,000 interactions every day, successful interactions between Afghan troops and Western troops in Afghanistan. There are, tragically, a few of these killings of essentially murders by them, but really they've assessed that only 25% are either infiltrated by the Taliban or Afghans who are influenced by the Taliban. There's a lot of good things happening. The risk of failure in this conflict is very, very high, but let's not get this too far out of perspective.
Major General Jim Molan, thanks for your time this morning.
Thanks, Karina.